Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good morning. Welcome to the fluid mechanics class today. Today we'll be discussing about lift force. In the last lecture we have already discussed about drag force. So today we'll focus on the lift force. So already we have seen the basic definition. That is when a body moves in the fluid or the fluid moves moves around the body, then there is a net force which is generated, and the force that is in line with the flow, in line with the motion, that is the drag force. The force that is perpendicular to the motion, that is the lift force. Okay, so the component of the force that acts normal to the flow direction is called lift force. That's what we have already seen. Now let us understand what is the lift, or when we calculate, the lift may vary, so we try to calculate the average lift. So the average lift per unit planform area of a wing, typically a aircraft wing, let us say, you call it wing loading. So you have a wing, and if you take the area of that wing, basically the area is the planar area and the force is acting in this direction. So we take that span area, and the area on which the force acts, the total force is, lift force is F. So F divided by A is that wing loading. All right. Hence, the airfoils are designed to generate lift while keeping the drag at a minimum so that they can move faster. Because if the drag force is higher, then there is a higher fuel consumption and the speed is going to reduce. Whereas drag has to be less and lift has to be more, so that the aircraft can move with a higher velocity as well as it can lift up to the required altitude. All right. In that, as we have already discussed, when the flow takes place, to reduce the drags, there used to be some kind of spoilers which we use. We have discussed that in the previous lecture. So these spoilers and inverted airfoils on racing cars generate negative lift to improve traction. So sometimes when the aircraft has to come and stop, there is no brake system in that. Rather, there will be some spoilers which are attached, and these spoilers are going to increase the drag, and that will increase the resistance. So spoilers and inverted airfoils on racing cars generate negative lift. So if you look at the inverted racing cars, you see this airfoil which is cambered shape. So you see a convex shape on the top and slightly concave or flatter shape on the bottom. So this difference is called, or this shape is called cambered shape, and there will be a lift force which is going to be generated in the upward direction. We'll see how it is generated and what happens. But let us now understand that lift force is generated towards the upward direction because of the shape. Now if I reverse or flip this orientation, then what will happen? The lift force is going to act downward direction. So now you might have seen many racing cars, so they need to be grounded as much as possible so that they don't topple over. Okay, so the lift force should be pushing them to the ground so that even with high speed they are stable. So for that, the same airfoil is placed in an inverted manner so that the lift force acts downwards and the speeding racing car is going to be stable and attached to the ground, unless otherwise the inertia is going to lift up, and which is more than the lift force that has been calculated for. All right. So in all this, we have already seen that the drag force is mostly dependent on the skin friction drag and as well as form drag, whereas the lift force doesn't depend on the viscosity or the skin friction. So the contribution of viscous effect to the lift force is usually negligible. Okay. Now let us understand how this lift force is generated. Okay. Lift occurs because the pressure distribution on the surface of the airfoil is going to be different. If I take a uniformly or symmetrically aligned body, I take one airfoil which is symmetric on both sides. Now what happens if this airfoil body is symmetric on both sides and it is held parallel to the flow? Then your flow is going to be deviated from the tip of the airfoil and it will move downstream, but there will be change on both sides, but both the changes are going to be same. So if both the changes are same, the variation in the pressure is also going to be same. The difference in the pressure is also going to be same. So net pressure or net force acting in any direction is going to be zero. All right. So if you take a sphere or you take a cylinder or you take a symmetrical body and you allow the flow to pass around that, the net lift force is going to be zero. All right. But if the shape is not symmetric or if it is held slightly inclined, now the kind of figure that you can see here, this airfoil shape is held slightly in a inclined manner or with an angle. Now because of that, what happens, there is the flow is passing on the top as well as at the bottom. Now the flow that is passing on the top, you can see there is the streamline is going to be closer to each other, so that indicates that the velocities are higher. Okay. So similarly, here bottom, what happens, the area available is more. Here the area available was less. Now at the bottom, when the area available is more, your velocity is going to be comparatively lower than the top. So if the velocity is lower, then what will happen? The pressure is going to be higher. So at the bottom you get a positive pressure, all right, and at the top you get a negative pressure or low pressure. So the higher pressure is going to be pushing the object towards the upward direction. Okay, and that net force which is acting upward is nothing but your lift force. Okay, so typically the pressure distribution diagram is given here. You can see how the pressure varies on the top of this airfoil as well as at the bottom of the airfoil, and from this you can clearly calculate the net pressure that is acting in the upward direction, okay, or in the transverse direction to the flow. So in this, we saw that if the symmetric body is held parallel, then obviously there is no lift because the flow pattern is going to be same on both sides and net force is going to be zero because the pressure variation is not going to be there. So the net force is zero. But if we held this uh, object in an angle or airfoil with an angle, then there is going to be a force. So that angle is nothing but your angle of attack. So this angle is with respect to the flow direction, not with respect to horizontal. So the angle is with respect to the flow direction. If the flow is coming from this direction and the object is moving with an angle, then that is your angle of attack. Okay. So this angle of attack plays a role in contributing the lift. So the lift force is going to be higher or lower, or how much it will increase at different angle of attacks, that depends on the pressure distribution that takes place during various angle of attacks. All right. So lift is practically independent of the surface roughness because we have already discussed the viscous effect is negligible. So if viscous effect is negligible, obviously the surface roughness is not going to play major role in the lift formation, the lift force that we will get. Okay, and the shear is not going to play any role. It is rather the pressure distribution which is playing the major role in generating lift. All right. Now let us understand the lift produced. As I have already explained, for symmetric airfoil the lift is going to be zero. Okay, so this is something you should be able to understand, whether it is real fluid flow or ideal fluid flow. When we talk about symmetric airfoil, then the lift is, or symmetric body, then the lift is going to be 0. Now in case of cambered airfoil, there is going to be lift. So for non-symmetrical airfoils, the stagnation point that moves as shown in the figure slightly downwards. If you talk about the stagnation point for this particular symmetric body, what will happen? The stagnation point will be located at the tip of this airfoil, that is here in the upstream side, and there will be another stagnation point which will possibly be present at the downstream side. Okay, but in case of real fluid flow, due to the boundary layer separation, if the boundary layer separates slightly before the tip, then the stagnation point can be somewhere here and there will be a wake. Now in case of inclined body or with a cambered surface, what happens? The stagnation point is going to move slightly downwards. Okay, and if the stagnation point is here, then there will be a at the tail end there will be another stagnation point. So overall the pressure distribution on this side from the stagnation point to the stagnation point on the other side as well as on the lower side, they will be different, they will not be symmetric, and because of this there will be a net lift which is going to act. Okay, so a measure of the performance of airfoils is basically the lift to drag ratio. So we will be able to find out what is the lift force or lift coefficient we sometimes talk about, and similarly we take the ratio lift force to drag force or lift coefficient to drag coefficient, and that ratio is nothing but your typical performance of the particular shape of the body. All right, now let us look at a typical plot that is plotted here for different angle of attacks. You have a typical body, okay, airfoil, and for that airfoil, if we take the lift coefficient with different angle of attacks, you can see here the lift coefficient is increasing and then it is decreasing. So here when we talk about lift coefficient, it is similar to drag coefficient, and we calculate like the lift force FL is equals to half CL lift coefficient multiplied by rho A V square. It is similar to what we calculated for drag force. FD is equals to half CD into half rho A V square, and here FL equals to CL into half rho A V square. Okay, that's per unit width. Okay, so we have lift force here, and from that lift force we could calculate the lift coefficient, and the lift coefficient we saw it is increasing with angle of attacks, but up to a certain point. After that, if you increase the angle of attack, the lift coefficient is going to decrease. It is going to, lift is not going to continuously increase if you keep on increasing the angle of attack. After some time, what happens? Your angle becomes slightly more, then the pressure variation is going to be completely different, and you will not get much lift, rather you will get a drag, because the complete body is going to behave like a bluff body that we have already discussed. Okay, even if the airfoil is held like this across the flow, this is a streamline body, but it depends how you hold it, right? So streamline depends again how you hold it, and if a plate can be called bluff body if it is held across the flow, if it can be called streamline body if it is held parallel to the flow. Similarly, airfoil can also change its characteristics. Now the same airfoil where we talked that if you give some angle of attack, there is going to be a lift production or lift generation. Now if you keep increasing the angle of attack up to certain point, this lift force increases, beyond which it is going to decrease. Now similarly, drag force we have already seen. If you hold it parallel, the drag force is going to be minimum. As you keep on increasing the angle of attack, the drag is going to increase. Okay, up to 90 degrees positively, it will continuously increase. Now if we take the ratio CL by CD, that's the drag coefficient divided by lift coefficient divided by drag coefficient, or you can talk about lift force divided by drag force. You will get some plot that is shown here in the dotted line. So that shows the performance. So from this we can find out at what angle of attack the performance of this body is going to be maximum, or performance in sense the net force, you can say, at least is going to be minimum. Okay, so with that kind of angle of attack, with that shape, the body is going to move at a faster rate. Okay, so the CL by CD ratio increases with angle of attack to a certain extent, and leading edge and trailing edge flaps of a wing are used for altering the this CL by CD ratios at different times, mainly during the takeoff and landing. So what happens if you look at this airplane wing, there is a tail flap here, and this tail flap can be lowered or raised so that the shape of the body can be varied. And once you vary the shape of the body, then you basically change the lift as well as the drag coefficients when it is moving. And based on that, if the lift is reduced, then the aircraft is going to come down. If the drag is increased, then the aircraft is going to slow down, and so on, right? So you can actually play with this lift and drag coefficients or lift and drag forces just by changing this tail flap of the wing. Okay, so this flap, what you see, if you happen to observe some time, then you can see this flap moves up and down, and because of that the overall force is going to change. All right, now if the angle of attack exceeds certain limit, as we have seen, the flow separates on the upper surface of the airfoil, and there is a sudden drop in the value of CL by CD. So this performance is going to reduce, because if you keep on increasing the angle of attack with respect to the flow, at certain point there will be quick flow separation on the upper point. So at the tip, what we see close to the tip, there will be flow separation. So you generate a huge uh, drag or huge wake area, and you create a huge drag force, and because of that the CL by CD is going to suddenly drop at that point. And if it happens, what will happen in case of realistic scenario? So you imagine a aircraft is moving, and suddenly this drag is going to increase so much and lift is going to reduce. So first of all, the aircraft will slow down. In addition, the moment there is a sudden drop in the lift, the aircraft can suddenly fall. It can dive down by several hundreds of meters. So there have been situations, there have been scenarios, you might have heard of the news, that suddenly the aircraft came down substantially for certain distance. So that can create a lot of problems to the passengers, as well as it might lead to accidents. So we need to avoid that. And it is not necessary always that this aircraft that will fall down because of the angle of attack. There could be other reasons. There could be turbulence which starts creating that sudden flow separation, and due to which the aircraft can fall, or due to the turbulence the wings are not going to really act the way they are supposed to, and the lift force is suddenly reduced, then the aircraft can come down. So there are several scenarios. All right, so the stall condition, this condition when the aircraft when the CL by CD ratio suddenly drops, is known as the stall condition. Okay, or stall, that angle is called stall angle. So the limiting angle, if the angle of attack exceeds a certain limiting value, that's the stall angle, the flow separates on the upper surface of the airfoil, and there is a sudden drop in the value of CL by CD, and the stall condition are unstable and must be avoided. Okay, so that's why there is always a factor of safety, so that whenever we are flying the aircraft, we never reach close to the stall angle. Okay, now if you try to understand this angle of attack and look at the forces that are going to be developed because of the angle of attack, So we will be able to find out there is another terminology which is called induced drag. Okay, the drag that is induced due to the lift. So we'll see what is that. Assume this is the dotted line is our horizontal surface, and this line which is drawn here, that is the direction of the fluid motion. So the, let us say the wind is blowing in that direction. Okay, and your airfoil or wing of the aircraft has an angle that is alpha, okay, with respect to horizontal. So now the movement of the wind has an angle of epsilon, and the angle of the airfoil is alpha. So the effective angle, that is actually the angle of attack, is nothing but your alpha 0, and that is the difference between alpha and epsilon. So alpha 0, this angle of attack, is nothing but alpha minus epsilon. So this is just to emphasize that when we talk about angle of attack or angle for lift, it is with respect to the flow direction. Okay, so you might have a completely ambient and static weather condition, so there is no wind motion, where only the aircraft is moving with certain velocity. So in that case, the direction is with respect to horizontal, because the initial wind condition was completely static. So now your aircraft is moving with certain velocity, that is the ambient velocity, and we have already discussed that it is the velocity, it is the relative velocity of the flow and the, or the fluid and the body. So here in this case, the wind can be completely static and the aircraft is moving. In case of the wind is also blowing, okay, which is the case in general, then we will have to find out the direction of the wind as well as the angle with which the aircraft is moving, or the airfoil makes an angle alpha naught. Okay, so that's the angle of attack we consider. Now if that is the case, then let us resolve the forces. So if you look at this FL0, your U0 is the ambient wind or free stream velocity, and perpendicular to that direction is going to be your lift force, that is FL0. Okay, so we have defined our lift force is the force that is perpendicular to the flow direction. So FL0 becomes your lift force, and if you resolve now that force, you resolve in the vertical and horizontal directions. Why? Because finally the body has to be lifted up in the vertical direction. We may be resolving this with respect to the motion, fluid motion, but finally the body has to be lifted up in the vertical direction. So the lift, actual lift that we are getting is FL, which is in the vertical direction. The component of FL0 in the vertical direction is your lift force, and there is a component which is also acting in the horizontal direction. So that is going to be added to the drag force. You already have some drag force, and this FDI, which is the induced drag, is going to be added to the drag force, and that has come because of this small angle of attack, and this angle of attack is obviously going to create some amount of resistance, and that is nothing but your induced drag. All right, so this lift force FL0 resulting from the circulation about the two-dimensional airfoil must act normal to U0. Okay, that's what we have already discussed, and the force FL0 can be resolved into two components. FL normal to the free stream velocity U represent the true lift, okay, and whereas FDI is then additional drag force called as induced drag that is going to be generated due to this lift generation. All right. So finally FD, the total drag force, is FD0, the drag due to the free stream velocity plus the induced drag. All right. So similarly, when we calculate the effective drag CD, that is going to be CD0 plus CDI. Okay. So this is how the total CD is calculated. So you might be thinking initially we talked about some CD. Now we are talking some other CD. So it is dependent on the problem statement that we are looking at. In this case, there is an induced drag generated, so we have to add it. We have to account for that. All right. Now let us look at a airplane wing or a planform. Okay, subject to span-wise elliptical distribution of lift. So span-wise elliptical distribution of lift means you have the span here. So along this you have some lift distribution, and that distribution is going to be elliptical. So it can be shown that ui, that is the induced the velocity component. If similarly the free stream velocity can be resolved into two components, one is in the horizontal direction and another in the vertical direction. So the component that is in the vertical direction, I can call it ui. So this ui divided by u is equals to cl divided by pi multiplied by b by c. Okay, and in this case b is the width and c is the chord length. So c is the chord length that is from here to here, and b is the wing area, so wing length or wing width, whatever we may call it. So chord length is this one. All right, so transverse to that we may have some distance, that is your b. So it depends on this ratio, that is cl divided by pi multiplied by b by c, which is, we can call it epsilon or some notation, doesn't matter. All right, now if I write down the fdi is the induced drag or induced drag force, that can be written as cl divided by pi b by c multiplied by fl. Okay, so this angle epsilon that we have already discussed here, okay, is nothing but this. Okay, epsilon is equals to ui divided by u, and that we can represent in terms of fdi is equals to this angle multiplied by fl. All right, so now cdi, if I want to write down, so cdi is equals to fdi divided by is the drag force divided by half rho u square into area. So area is nothing but b into c. All right, so force divided by area is going to give you the drag coefficient. Okay, now let us substitute the value of fdi that we have written here, okay, and rewrite. So if you do that, you can write down this expression by substituting the value of fdi. All right, now if you just rephrase this, you can write down, after solving this, you can write down the final expression is cl square, okay, cdi is equals to cl square divided by pi multiplied by b by c. Okay, so what we observed that this expression cdi is dependent of, or the equation shows that the induced drag coefficient depends on the lift coefficient and the aspect ratio of the airfoil. So aspect ratio is nothing but your b by c, the span divided by the chord length. Okay, so this is the aspect ratio of the airfoil. All right, now you can also see that the cdi is the induced drag coefficient is also varying in terms of square of the lift coefficient. Okay, so as the lift coefficient is a function of the angle of attack, it can also be stated that the induced drag coefficient depends on the angle of attack and aspect ratio of the airfoil. All right, so already we have seen lift coefficient is a function of angle of attack. Now we could see induced drag coefficient depends on the angle of attack as well as the aspect ratio of the airfoil. All right, so these are the derivations or basic understanding, but there are number of natural applications. So what we have been learning in terms of engineering or science that we discuss is all learned from the nature. So if you look at the birds that are flying or the birds that fly in specific patterns, see if you can see there, you see these birds, they are flying just forming a pattern. So this form is just to help them to fly faster with less effort. So they use the energy. The first bird that is flying is actually going to leave some trail behind, and that energy is captured or used by the following birds, and they fly together, and they keep changing this position so that all of them can equally distribute or share the load while flying. So there is a teamwork which happens, and all these things involve a lot of science. So we have learned from them. Similarly, the shape of these airfoils we have also derived from feathers of these birds, how the shape of the feather is, and from that we have derived how this airfoil shape should be, and which then we have done our computational analysis, theoretical analysis, whatever we have done, and we have optimized the shapes that is required for us. But the first lesson has come from the nature. If you typically look at this is a small bird, rabbit-throated hummingbird, and it can beat its wing 52 times in a second. So you can see how fast it moves, and you can imagine how much the force that is acting because of the shape of the wing that it takes, and it can simply stay stable at a particular location. All right. So these are various lessons we have learned. All right, now let us look at one more effect that has been given to us by Magnus. Okay, and we call that as Magnus effect. So the Magnus effect is a force acting on a spinning body in a moving airstream or moving fluid which acts perpendicularly to the direction of airstream. Okay, so here fluid is considered as air, so we are writing airstream, but it could be in any fluid. All right. So now we have already discussed earlier, if you have a sphere or a cylinder and there is a uniform flow which takes place, there will not be any lift. Okay. But if this body is going to move with certain spinning velocity, then there is going to be lift. And why? So if you look at this diagram or the figure, see the cylinder or the sphere is moving or rotating in this direction. Now because of that, what happens, this uniform free stream velocity is going to be higher on this side, because this velocity Vr, radial velocity at this point, is going to add on to the free stream velocity, so there will be a higher velocity, and in addition there is some displacement which happens, and because of that there is also increase in velocity. Now on the bottom side, this same spinning motion creates a velocity which is opposing the free stream velocity. So the net velocity at this surface on the bottom side is going to be lower. So when we see this, the higher side is going to be having a higher velocity, lower side is going to be lower velocity, and the point of separations are going to be shifted. Instead of at this middle, they will be shifted downwards. Okay, and you will get a low pressure region on this surface and high pressure region on the bottom. Because the velocity is higher on the top and lower on the bottom, the pressure will be lower on the top and higher at the bottom. So because of this differential pressure, there is going to be a lift generated, and it will push the object up. Okay, so this effect is called as Magnus effect. All right, and a spinning ball or a cylinder curves away from its principal flight path due to the Magnus effect, because you might have thought of pushing it in this direction, but because of the spinning effect, it moves up. Okay, that is what happens. You might have observed in cricket. So when the spinning ball comes, it basically, depending on the spin, depending on the rotation or the circulation that is given, this lift force is going to be generated. So how it will take the flight, whether it will go up or down or what will happen, it depends on the spin that has been given. And that's why you might have seen most of the spinning balls, when it is hit, because there is already a lift, so there is a possibility that it will suddenly go up in the air. Okay, that's what happens. Okay, All right. So it affects the spinning missiles also. This is about cricket, but there are other practical applications. We have spinning missiles or design of rotor ships or Flettner airplanes. These are all going to use such concepts of Magnus effect. All right. There is also a possibility that the same kind of effect is used in various cylindrical motions or where the flow is passing through, and because of this lift it can be lifted up and you may have some energy imparted on some system. Okay, anyway, those things will not taken here, it will take a lot of time. So having understood Magnus effect, this is only a qualitative and theoretical explanation. Okay, but the actual expression, Magnus first presented this theory, but the expression for that was derived by Kuta-Joukowsky. So Kuta-Joukowsky gave a theorem which, or the expression which is called Kuta-Joukowsky theorem, that is basically to calculate the leap per unit span area. So now let us consider this cylinder. Okay, this cylinder is there and there is a flow coming from this direction with velocity v, and the cylinder length is L. Now the cylinder is rotating or spinning with some rotation, that is you can call it S or omega, whatever you want. So let us say it is rotating with an angular velocity omega. Okay, now if that is the case, already we have seen there will be a lift which will be generated, and the expression given by Kuta-Joukowsky says that the lift per unit span, that is L, is equals to rho v gamma. Okay, what is rho? Rho is the fluid density, v is the free stream velocity, and gamma is the circulation. Okay, and circulation is something that we have already discussed. You can easily calculate what is circulation. Circulation is nothing but the line integral of the velocity along a closed curve. So in this case, what is the closed curve? It is the surface of this cylinder, right? So along the surface of the cylinder, if we integrate the velocity, then you will get the circulation. So that we can write down as 2 pi r. R is the radius of the cylinder. So 2 pi r multiplied by Vr is the radial velocity. So we can also derive or write down the expression for Vr, that is nothing but the rotational speed. So 2 pi r omega is nothing but your Vr. Okay, so once you know with what angular speed the cylinder is rotating, you can easily find out the radial velocity, and from that we can also find out the circulation. And once we find out the circulation in a given flow direction, flow speed, we can also find out the leap force given the air property or fluid property, that is the density of the fluid. All right, so this is about the Magnus effect and the Kuta-Joukowsky's theorem, which is giving us the expression how to calculate the lift force per unit span. And given that the cylinder is certain meter long or certain units long, we can always multiply this force. The lift force is calculated per unit span. So if the span is, let us say, 10 meters or 15 meters, we can multiply that to find out the total lift force. All right, so this is understood. Now let us look at this. The same Magnus effect we can also, as I have already explained you, the cricket balls. Okay, we can also see the effect on the swing. So this is something you know already, these strips, they are called seam. Okay, so depending on how this position of the seam is, the flow separation, you see these are rough surface, the seam is going to provide some kind of rough surface. So because of this roughness, there is going to be a turbulence which will be generated, and because of this turbulence, as we have already seen, the moment you have turbulence, the boundary layer separation is going to be shifted downwards, because you are going to generate more momentum exchange, and because of the momentum exchange, the flow velocity is going to be slightly higher, closer to the wall, means higher in the sense comparatively it will be increased closer to the wall, and the flow will remain attached to the wall for further more distance, and because of that the flow separation is going to be delayed. So that's what is going to happen here. And because of the seam position, the flow is going to be separated slightly in the downstream, and here this side it is a smooth surface. Because of that, you see the flow separation takes place much earlier. And what happens in this case, there is a higher wake region formed in this side and lower wake region on the other side, because of which the overall pressure distribution is going to be different. And because of the pressure distribution, difference in the pressure distribution, there is going to be a shift of this ball to one side, and that is what is going to take convert into the swing. We call the swing. So the ball drops, and then when it goes, there is a swing which happens, and that we don't know how much swing it will happen. It depends exactly how the seam position was and what is the velocity with which the ball is going. Okay, so these unknown parameters are something which the batsman has to really guess and then act within fraction of seconds. There is also reverse swing we have seen. So reverse swing is something which we see that you have the smooth side. Here we have not discussed one thing, that's the rough side. You see the rough side is on the other side and smooth side is this. Okay, so what happens, because the rough side is on this side, the turbulence due to the rough side is not really generated. So this is the seam which is generating the turbulence, and the point of separation is downstream here, and this is smooth side. But in other case, the rough side is towards the batsman and the smooth side is towards the bowler. So now the flow is coming from this side. So what will happen, because of this roughness, there is turbulence being generated all the way from the beginning, also here, because of the roughness. And this roughness or the turbulence is going to be further again supported by these seam positions here, and it is going to be separated at this point. And similarly on this side also, more or less somewhere around that location, that will be separated. So there will be some difference, but it is going to create a reverse swing for the batsman. Okay, or the bowler is going to generate a reverse swing of this. So it depends how the bowler is holding the ball, whether the smooth side on front or rough side on front, that will decide how this swing is going to take place. Okay, and again the seam position is going to also matter. Okay, if you keep the seam position completely vertical, obviously that can completely give a different scenario. All right, so this flight of the ball, swing, reverse swing or conventional swing, all these depend on how we hold the ball, whether we have the rough side or smooth side. Most of the times you might have also observed that the one side of the ball is roughened by scrubbing it with their pant or with their shirt. Okay, so they just try to rough it up so that they can generate this kind of swing or difference in the bowling. Okay, so they don't rub it on both sides, because all of the players, they know, they actually first observe which side is actually rough and they try to roughen it further, but the smooth side is left as it is. But as the match goes on with the play, both sides may get some roughness gradually, so things will change as the play goes on. All right, so that's all about this leap concept. Now let us look at a typical example. Okay, so if you look at this example problem, it says a small airplane has a total mass of 2000 kg. So please observe, it is said mass of 2000 kg, it's not weight, and a wing area of 40 square meter. Determine the lift and drag coefficients of this airplane while cruising at an altitude of 4000 meter at a constant speed of 300 kilometer per hour, generating 220 kilowatt of power. Okay, the density of air could be 1.225 kg per meter cube, but depending on the altitude of the movement, or at different altitudes, the air density changes, or air density is going to reduce as we move higher in the altitude. So at different altitudes it is different. So at the altitude at which the airplane is moving, the density is given as 0.8 kg per meter cube. Okay, now this problem we'll try to solve. So as solution, the density is given as 0.8 kg per meter cube. Okay, now this problem we'll try to solve. So as a solution, we have already the u that is given, that is the velocity with which the airplane is moving. Okay, and it is given as 300 kilometers per hour. So 300 multiplied by 1000 gives you in terms of meters, and if you divide by 3600 gives you in terms of second. So finally we got the velocity is 83.33 meter per second. Okay, similarly we have now lift force. Lift force is going to lift the object. It is going to hold the object at certain position. So when the object is held at certain position, there are two forces acting. One is the weight of the object, and then there is a lift force which is holding it up. So both should be balanced or equal. Then only it is the equilibrium is maintained. So lift force is equals to the total weight. So the weight of the body is nothing but the lift force that you generate. Now if we write it down, the weight is equals to, or lift force is equals to, CL half rho A U square. Okay, that's the formula we have already seen. So in this case, lift force we have represented with W, that's the weight, and CL half rho is the density of the fluid, or in case of this problem it is air, area on which the force is acting, and u square is the velocity, okay, which we have already calculated. Now let us substitute the values. So weight is nothing but mass multiplied by unit weight. So mg, w is equals to mg. Mass is given, that is 2000. If you multiply with g, that becomes your weight. So we have the weight here on this side, and the other side we have substituted the value of area, that is given as 40 square meter. So wing area is given as 40 square meter. Please understand, the wing area is the area, that is the width of the wing, or the span of the wing multiplied by the chord. Okay, so that area, it can vary from place to place, but the total area is given as 40 square meter, and on that the lift force is acting. All right, so the area that is given as 40, u is given as 83.33. so by substituting all the values, we can now calculate the only unknown, that is CL. So if we calculate CL, that comes out to be 0.17658. okay, so this is my CL. Now if I want to calculate the drag force and drag coefficient, we have already calculated the lift coefficient. Okay, so the question was asking us to determine the lift and drag coefficients. So we have got the lift coefficients. To find out the drag coefficient, what do I need to do? I need to find out the forward motion and the resistance. Okay, so the power that is required to propel is nothing but the power required to overcome the drag force. Okay, so if we take the power and equate with drag force, then we will be able to get it. So power is equals to force multiplied by the velocity. So Fd multiplied by u is nothing but your power. So power is already given, so that is 220 kilowatt. Okay, so 220 kilowatt, we can put it kilowatt, we can put it in terms of watt. So 220,000 watt is equals to Fd is equals to Cd multiplied by half rho A u square. Okay, so that is given as here and multiplied by u. So by taking that, by substituting all the values, we could finally write down that the CD value is 0.02376. okay, so we got the lift coefficient, we got the drag coefficient. So it can be easily observed that the lift coefficient that we got is 0.17 something, is much higher, much larger compared to the drag coefficient. All right. So that is what is required. So now if we take the performance, that is the CL by CD, it is going to be higher. Okay, the performance will be much higher, and that is what is required for such kind of situations. All right, so this is to give you a brief overview of the drag and lift forces and drag and lift coefficients, how they are calculated and applied for various problems. But there is still much more to understand. This is only the basics or preliminary that we thought of covering in this fluid mechanics course. More details you can obviously learn as you go for the next levels. Okay. With this, we'll stop here, and thank you so much. Wish you a good day.